Captain Zara Vexathani pressed her six-fingered hand against the cold metal of the communications console, her purple skin pale with exhaustion. The bridge of the Catherian research vessel. Harmony's echo flickered with dying emergency lights, casting eerie shadows across the damaged control panels. Sparks flew from severed wiring as another explosion rocked the ship, sending her stumbling against the captain's chair. "Status report!" she barked to her remaining crew, though she could already see the hopelessness in their large, amber eyes. The Catherians were a peaceful species, evolved from herbivorous creatures on a world where cooperation meant survival. Their ships reflected this philosophy, designed for exploration and research, not warfare. Lieutenant Mordan looked up from his station, his normally pristine uniform torn and stained with the luminescent blue of Catherian blood. "Hull breaches on decks 4 through 7. Life support is failing throughout the ship. The quantum drive is completely offline." He paused, his voice breaking slightly. "Captain, we have perhaps 30 minutes of breathable atmosphere remaining." Through the main viewport, Zara could see the massive silhouettes of the Krillian dreadnoughts closing in. Their ships were nightmares of black metal and pulsing red energy, built by a species that had turned warfare into an art form. The Krillians stood over 8 feet tall, their exoskeletons naturally armored, their multiple arms capable of wielding weapons that would crush most other beings. They had been expanding across the galaxy for centuries, consuming entire star systems and enslaving any species they deemed useful. "Incoming transmission from the lead Krillian vessel," reported Communications Officer Lyra, her voice barely above a whisper. "On screen," Zara commanded, straightening her shoulders despite the hopelessness of their situation. The holographic display shimmered to life, revealing the terrifying visage of War Prime Vraktar. His chitinous face was a maze of scars, each one telling the story of a conquered world. 4 of his 6 eyes focused on Zara, while the others scanned tactical displays only he could see. When he spoke, his voice was like grinding stone. "Catherian vessel, you will surrender your research data on quantum tunnel networks immediately. Comply and your deaths will be swift. Resist, and we will extract the information from your still-living minds." Zara felt her crew tense around her. The quantum tunnel research represented decades of work by the galaxy's greatest scientific minds. It was the key to instantaneous travel across vast distances, technology that could revolutionize galactic civilization. In the wrong hands, it would make the Krillian war machine unstoppable. "We will never surrender that information to you," Zara replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "The tunnel network technology belongs to all peaceful species, not warmongers like your kind." Vraktar's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "Your nobility is admirable but meaningless. We have already conquered the Altarian Republic, the Zephyrian Collective, and the Moran Federation. The Galactic Council's pathetic defense forces were swept aside like dust. You are alone, little Catherian. No one is coming to save you." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Zara looked around at her crew. 15 of the brightest scientific minds in Catherian space, now facing certain death or worse. She had known many of them for years, had watched them make discoveries that pushed the boundaries of known science. The thought of their knowledge being perverted into tools of conquest made her feel physically ill. "Captain," Mordan said quietly, "there might be another option." Zara turned to him, hope flickering in her chest. "What do you mean?" "The long-range sensor array. It's damaged but still partially functional. We could send out a general distress call, broadcast it across all known communication channels. Perhaps someone somewhere might respond." Science Officer Krelna, an elderly Catherian whose expertise in quantum mechanics was legendary, shook her head sadly. "Lieutenant? Who would answer? The Council forces have been decimated. The major powers are either conquered or in full retreat. Who else is there? Mordan hesitated, then pulled up a star chart on his console. There are rumors, Captain. Stories told in the outer colonies about a species from the far reaches of the galaxy. They call themselves humans. Most scholars believe they're just legends, but some traders claim to have encountered them. What kind of legends? Zara asked, though part of her felt foolish for even considering such tales. They say humans are from a death world, a planet so hostile that simply surviving there made them into something unprecedented. The stories claim they don't just fight wars, they end them, that they've never lost a conflict once they fully commit to it. Mordan's voice dropped. They say humans don't understand the concept of acceptable losses when someone threatens their friends. Another explosion shook the ship, this one closer than before. Warning alarms blared as additional hull sections buckled under the Krillian bombardment. Through the viewports, Zara could see fighter craft swarming toward them like angry insects. How long would it take for such a signal to reach human space, assuming they exist? She asked. With our current power levels, we could boost the quantum communicator enough to reach approximately 50,000 light-years, Krelna calculated quickly. If humans are real, and if they're in that region, they might receive the message in a few hours. Hours we don't have, Lyra pointed out, as another systems alarm joined the cacophony. Zara made her decision. As captain, it was her duty to try everything possible to protect not just her crew, but the knowledge they carried. Send the message. Broadcast on all frequencies. Tell them who we are, what we're carrying, and what's happening here. Captain, Mordan said softly. What should I say about humanity? How do we address a species that might not even exist? Zara thought for a moment, remembering something her grandmother had once told her about the power of hope, even in the darkest circumstances. Tell them that the galaxy needs them, that innocent people are dying, and that the monsters are winning. If humans are real, and if they're anything like the stories say, that should be enough. As Mordan's fingers flew over his console, crafting humanity's first introduction to the greater galactic community, the Krillian ships moved closer. Their weapon arrays glowed with ominous energy as they prepared for the final assault. In the background, Zara could hear the faint hiss of atmosphere leaking through microfractures in the hull. Message composed and ready for transmission, Captain, Mordan reported. Send it, Zara commanded. Send it to every corner of the galaxy. The quantum communicator hummed with power as it broadcast their desperate plea across the void. The message raced through subspace at speeds that defied conventional physics, carrying with it the hopes of a dying ship and the desperate faith that somewhere, somehow, someone would hear their call. Unknown to the crew of the Harmony's Echo, their message would indeed reach its destination. In a small monitoring station orbiting Earth's moon, a junior communications technician named Sarah Chen would nearly spill her coffee when her equipment detected the impossible, a faster-than-light transmission from deep space containing mathematical proofs that suggested the existence of alien intelligence. But that discovery was still hours away. For now, Zara and her crew could only wait as the Krillian ships closed in. Their weapons charging for what War Prime Vraktar assumed would be another easy victory in his species' endless campaign of conquest. The Krillians had never encountered humanity before. They had no concept of what they had just awakened in the depths of space. They could not imagine that their casual brutality had just signed their own death warrant. As the first Krillian boarding pods launched toward the crippled research vessel, Zara Vexathani stood on her bridge and wondered if her message would ever reach anyone who could make a difference. She had no way of knowing that at that very moment, the wheels of humanity's war machine were beginning to turn, and that the galaxy was about to witness something unprecedented in its long and bloody history. The age of Krillian dominance was about to end. Though neither aggressor nor victim yet understood the magnitude of what had been set in motion by a simple plea for help from a dying ship. Admiral Elena Vasquez stood in the center of the Terran Defense Force's primary command center, her steel-gray eyes fixed on the holographic display that showed their fleet's formation. 3 months had passed since the Catherian message had reached Earth, 3 months of the most intensive military preparation in human history. What had started as first contact protocols had rapidly evolved into something far more serious when subsequent alien transmissions revealed the scope of the Krillian threat. The command center buzzed with activity as hundreds of technicians and officers coordinated the largest military operation humanity had ever undertaken. Banks of quantum computers processed tactical data while communication arrays maintained contact with fleet elements scattered across a dozen star systems. The air hummed with the controlled tension that preceded major combat operations. "Fleet status report," Vasquez commanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent decades turning Earth's fractured military forces into a unified fighting machine. Captain Marcus Thompson, her chief of staff, consulted his displays. "All battle groups are in position. The First Fleet is holding at the staging area in the Alpha Centauri system. Admiral Chen's Second Fleet has completed their deep space reconnaissance and is standing by at the edge of Krillian territory. The Third Fleet remains in Earth orbit as strategic reserve." Vasquez nodded, studying the tactical situation. Intelligence gathered from rescued survivors painted a grim picture of Krillian capabilities. Their ships were massive, heavily armed, and backed by the industrial output of dozens of conquered worlds. On paper, the enemy held every advantage except one. They had never faced humans in combat. "What's our current strength assessment?" she asked. Dr. James Harrison, the fleet's chief science officer, stepped forward. A former theoretical physicist turned military analyst, he had spent the past months studying everything humanity knew about their potential enemies. "Based on the data from the Catherian refugees and other survivors we've encountered, we're looking at approximately 12,000 Krillian vessels of various classes. Their largest dreadnoughts mass nearly 50 million tons and carry enough firepower to crack planets. And our forces? 850 ships across all 3 fleets, Harrison replied. Significantly smaller individual vessels, but incorporating technology the Krillians have never encountered. Our advantages lie in speed, maneuverability, and weapons technology developed through centuries of human conflict." Vasquez allowed herself a slight smile. Humanity's warlike history, often seen as a source of shame, had become their greatest asset. While other species had evolved beyond large-scale warfare, humans had continued to refine the art of destruction right up until the moment they discovered they weren't alone in the universe. "Admiral," came a voice from the communications station. "We're receiving a transmission from Captain Zara Vexathani of the Catherian vessel New Dawn." The main display shifted to show the purple-skinned alien captain who had become humanity's primary liaison with the galactic refugee community. Over the past months, Zara had provided invaluable intelligence about Krillian tactics and capabilities. More importantly, she had helped humanity understand what they were really fighting for. "Admiral Vasquez," Zara's voice carried the strain of someone who had witnessed too much death. "I wanted to personally thank you before your fleet departs. When we sent that first message, we never dared hope that anyone would respond, let alone with the force you've assembled." "Captain Vexathani," Vasquez replied. "Humanity has a saying. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing. We received your message. We understood what was at stake. The response was never in question." Zara's large amber eyes seemed to glisten with emotion. "The Krillians have been expanding for over 3 centuries, Admiral. They've conquered species that had been spacefaring for millennia. Their war machine has consumed entire star clusters. What makes you believe that humanity can succeed where so many others have failed?" Vasquez was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "Captain, most species seem to view war as an extension of politics, a tool for achieving specific objectives with acceptable costs. Humans view war differently. When we decide something needs to be destroyed, we don't stop until the job is finished, regardless of cost. The Krillians made a crucial error when they threatened innocent people within our reach. They made it personal." The transmission ended, leaving the command center in contemplative silence. Vasquez turned to address her senior staff, the people who would help her coordinate humanity's first interstellar war. "Ladies and gentlemen, in approximately 6 hours, we will begin Operation Hammerfall. For those of you who weren't present during the initial planning sessions, let me outline our strategy." The holographic display shifted to show Krillian territory, a cancer of red spreading across nearly a quarter of the galaxy's inhabited systems. Traditional military doctrine would suggest a cautious approach, probe their defenses, identify weak points, gradually push back their expansion. We're not going to do that. Instead, we're going to demonstrate something the Krillians have apparently never encountered, the concept of total war. Colonel Sarah Martinez, the fleet's Marine commander, leaned forward. "Admiral, our intelligence suggests the Krillians maintain their empire through fear and overwhelming local superiority. What happens when we challenge that directly?" "That's exactly what we're going to find out, Colonel. The First Fleet will conduct simultaneous strikes on 12 major Krillian staging areas. Not harassment raids, full-scale assaults designed to completely eliminate enemy forces and infrastructure. We're going to announce humanity's presence in the galaxy in a way that cannot be ignored or dismissed." Dr. Harrison pulled up detailed schematics of human weaponry. "Admiral, our technological advantages are significant but not overwhelming individually. It's the combination that should prove decisive. Krillian shields are designed to stop energy weapons and kinetic projectiles moving at conventional velocities. They've never had to deal with relativistic kill vehicles or quantum-tunneling warheads. More importantly," added Captain Thompson, "their tactics are based on shock and intimidation. They're used to enemies who surrender after seeing a fraction of their fleet's power. They have no experience with opponents who fight harder when outnumbered." Vasquez studied the faces of her staff, seeing the mixture of determination and controlled fear that she felt herself. None of them harbored any illusions about the magnitude of what they were attempting. Humanity was about to announce itself to a hostile galaxy by picking a fight with its most dangerous predators. "There's something else we need to discuss," she continued. "The psychological warfare aspect of our campaign. The Krillians maintain control through terror, making examples of those who resist them. They need to understand that attacking innocent people within humanity's sphere of influence will result not in submission, but in their complete destruction." The holographic display shifted again, showing the planned attack vectors for each fleet element. Red arrows swept deep into Krillian space, targeting shipyards, supply depots, and command centers. It was an audacious plan that violated every conventional wisdom about challenging a superior force. "Admiral," came a voice from the tactical station. "We're receiving final confirmations from all fleet commanders. All ships report ready for quantum tunnel transit." Vasquez took a deep breath, thinking about the message that had started all of this. A desperate plea from a dying ship, broadcast into the void with nothing but hope that someone, somewhere, might care enough to respond. In a few hours, the Krillians would learn that someone had indeed heard that call. "Signal all fleets," she commanded. "Operation Hammerfall is a go. Transit to combat zones in T-minus 30 minutes. As alarms sounded throughout the command center and final preparations began, Vasquez found herself thinking about the conversations she'd had with various alien refugees over the past months. They had all expressed the same sentiment, gratitude mixed with puzzlement that humanity would risk everything for strangers they had never met. The concept seemed to genuinely confuse most alien species. Why would humans travel thousands of light years to fight someone else's war? Why risk their own civilization to protect people they barely knew? The questions had made Vasquez realize how unique humanity's response truly was. She thought about her own motivations, the driving force that had led her to volunteer for what many considered a suicide mission. It wasn't complex political calculation or strategic necessity. It was simpler than that, more fundamental. Someone had asked for help. People were suffering. That was enough. "Admiral," Captain Thompson announced. "All fleets report ready for transit." Vasquez nodded, looking one last time at the tactical display that showed humanity's fleet preparing to leap across the galaxy. In a few hours, they would either announce themselves as a new galactic power or die in the attempt. Either way, the universe would know that humans had heard the call for help. "Execute transit," she ordered. Space around the human fleet began to twist and fold as quantum tunnel generators activated. One by one, humanity's ships disappeared into artificially created wormholes, racing toward a confrontation that would reshape the balance of power across the galaxy. War Prime Vraktar and his Krillian Empire were about to discover what happened when they made enemies of a species that had spent its entire evolutionary history learning how to kill efficiently. The galaxy was about to witness something unprecedented. Humanity's answer to a plea for help. War Prime Vraktar stood on the command deck of his flagship, Endless Conquest, studying the tactical displays that showed his empire's current expansion operations. The massive Krillian dreadnought hung in space above the recently conquered world of Thalos Prime, its weapons arrays still glowing from the bombardment that had reduced the planet's defense installations to molten slag. The conquest of Thalos had been particularly satisfying. The Thalosians had actually believed their orbital defense platforms could withstand Krillian firepower. Vraktar's mandibles clicked in amusement as he recalled the planetary governor's final transmission, pleading for mercy for his people. Such naive idealism always amused the War Prime. Mercy was a weakness that had no place in the galaxy's natural order. "War Prime," came the voice of Subcommander Grelnak, interrupting his thoughts. "We're receiving priority communications from multiple sectors simultaneously." Vraktar turned his massive form toward the communications station. In the 3 centuries since the Krillian expansion began, simultaneous priority transmissions were almost unheard of. His empire was vast, spanning thousands of star systems, but his iron discipline ensured that local commanders rarely needed to contact the central command simultaneously. "Display the transmissions," he commanded, his 4 primary eyes focusing on the tactical display, while his auxiliary eyes continued monitoring other ship functions. The holographic projector activated, showing the scarred face of Fleet Commander Morthek from the Altarian sector. The veteran warrior's expression carried something Vraktar had rarely seen in his subordinates: genuine fear. "War Prime, we are under attack by unknown vessels. They appeared without warning and are engaging our forces with unprecedented coordination and firepower. Our ships are—" The transmission cut to static as something massive exploded in the background. Before Vraktar could respond, another transmission activated. This one showed Fleet Commander Zephyra from the Cygnus arm, her chitinous features bearing fresh battle scars. "War Prime, requesting immediate reinforcements. Unknown alien forces have destroyed the Vorthak shipyards and are advancing on our secondary positions. Their weapons are unlike anything we've encountered." "They're not following conventional attack patterns. Her transmission also dissolved into static and flame. Within seconds, 8 more transmissions activated simultaneously. Fleet commanders from across Krillian space, all reporting the same impossible scenario: simultaneous attacks by unknown forces, devastating losses, and an enemy that fought with tactics no Krillian had ever encountered. "Sir," Subcommander Grelnak's voice carried an edge of uncertainty. "All transmissions originated at approximately the same time, accounting for communication delays. This suggests coordinated attacks across our entire expansion front. Vraktar felt something he hadn't experienced in decades: doubt. The Krillian Empire had been built on the foundation of overwhelming superiority. Their ships were larger, their weapons more powerful, their warriors more experienced than any species they had encountered. The idea that some unknown force could challenge them simultaneously across multiple sectors was beyond his comprehension. "What do we know about these attackers?" he demanded. "Very little, War Prime. The few coherent reports describe vessels smaller than our standard cruisers, but moving at impossible velocities. Their weapons seem to ignore our shield configurations entirely. Most disturbing, they appear to be targeting our command and control structures with precision intelligence." Before Vraktar could respond, the ship's long-range sensors began screaming warnings. Space itself seemed to twist and fold at the edge of the Thalos system as quantum tunnels opened and disgorged their contents. Vraktar watched in disbelief as dozens of sleek, angular vessels emerged from the artificial wormholes. The ships were unlike anything in his military databases. Where Krillian vessels were designed to inspire fear through sheer mass and overwhelming firepower, these craft seemed built for pure functionality. They moved with predatory grace, their formations shifting and adapting even as they accelerated toward his fleet. "Incoming transmission from the lead enemy vessel," Grelnak reported, his voice barely steady. "Put it through," Vraktar commanded. After 3 centuries of conquest, he was curious to hear what this new species would say. In his experience, most civilizations tried to negotiate once they saw the full might of the Krillian war machine. The holographic display shimmered and resolved into the image of something Vraktar had never seen before. The creature was smaller than a Krillian, with pale skin and only 2 eyes, but those eyes held an intelligence that made the War Prime's combat instincts twitch warnings. "I am Admiral Elena Vasquez of the Terran Defense Force," the alien said, her voice carrying an authority that demanded attention. "You are War Prime Vraktar, commander of the Krillian forces responsible for the attack on the Catherian research vessel Harmony's Echo." Vraktar's mandibles clicked in surprise. How did this unknown species know about one minor skirmish among thousands? The Catherian incident had been months ago, barely worth remembering among his countless victories. "I am," he replied carefully. "What concern is that of yours? Alien?" The human's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes suggested barely controlled violence. 3 months ago, Captain Zara Vexithani sent a message asking for help. You and your species made the mistake of assuming no one would answer. Before Vraktar could respond, his tactical displays erupted with warnings. The human fleet had opened fire, but their weapons were unlike anything he had ever encountered. Instead of energy beams or kinetic projectiles, his sensors detected impossible readings, matter being converted to energy at the quantum level, projectiles that seemed to ignore the normal laws of physics, warheads that materialized inside his ship's shields. The heavy cruiser, Devourer, simply vanished in a flash of annihilating matter and antimatter. The battleship Iron Fist buckled as quantum-tunneling warheads materialized inside its armored hull and detonated. Within seconds, Vraktar watched a dozen of his most powerful vessels reduced to expanding clouds of superheated plasma. Impossible, he breathed, his multiple eyes struggling to process what he was seeing. The human admiral continued speaking as if the destruction of his fleet was merely a minor distraction. War Prime, your species has spent centuries spreading terror across the galaxy. You've conquered the weak, enslaved the peaceful, and destroyed countless civilizations. Today, you learn what happens when you threaten people under humanity's protection. Vraktar's rage overrode his shock. How dare this insignificant species challenge Krillian supremacy? You think your primitive technology can stand against the might of the Krillian Empire? I command 12,000 warships across 100 sectors. Had, Admiral Vasquez corrected calmly. Past tense. As of approximately 7 minutes ago, your empire ceased to exist as a functional military force. What you're experiencing here is happening simultaneously across every major Krillian installation in the galaxy. The tactical display confirmed her words. Reports continued flooding in from across Krillian space. Shipyards destroyed, fleets annihilated, command centers obliterated. These humans had launched the most comprehensive military operation in galactic history, and they had done it to answer a single distress call. "You're lying," Vraktar snarled, though doubt gnawed at his certainty. No species could coordinate such an operation. War Prime, you've spent 3 centuries fighting species that evolved beyond large-scale warfare. You've never faced an opponent that spent their entire evolutionary history learning how to kill efficiently. The human's voice carried a deadly certainty. We didn't come here to conquer territory or claim resources. We came here to eliminate a threat to innocent people. That makes us very focused in our approach. Another wave of human weapons fire swept across the remaining Krillian vessels. Vraktar watched his personal escort squadron disintegrate under the assault of weapons that seemed to rewrite the rules of physics. The humans weren't just winning, they were demonstrating a level of military technology that made Krillian supremacy look primitive. "What do you want?" he asked, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "Unconditional surrender of all Krillian forces, immediate withdrawal from all conquered territories, reparations to be paid to the species you've enslaved, war crimes trials for you and your senior commanders." Admiral Vasquez's tone suggested she was reading from a prepared list. "In return, we'll allow your home worlds to exist as independent systems under galactic monitoring." Vraktar's pride warred with the reality of his situation. Around him, the command deck sparked and groaned as human weapons found their mark. His mighty flagship, terror of 100 worlds, was being systematically dismantled by vessels a fraction of its size. "And if I refuse?" The human's smile held no warmth whatsoever. "War Prime, 3 months ago, a dying Catherian captain asked the universe for help. Today, you're learning that someone heard her. If you refuse our terms, you'll discover what happens when humans stop holding back." For the first time in his long military career, Vraktar truly understood fear. These humans weren't just another species to be conquered. They were something unprecedented in his experience, a civilization that had weaponized compassion itself. They had crossed impossible distances and committed enormous resources not for conquest or gain, but simply because someone had asked for help. As his flagship's shields finally collapsed under the relentless human assault, Vraktar made a decision that would reshape galactic history. The age of Krillian dominance was over, ended by a species that had answered a single desperate plea for help with overwhelming force. The galaxy would remember this day as the moment humanity announced its presence as the protector of the innocent and the enemy of tyrants everywhere. Captain Zara Vexethani's desperate message had not only been heard, it had awakened something that would forever change the balance of power among the stars. War Prime Vraktar, conqueror of worlds, submitted his unconditional surrender to a species he had never heard of until that morning. The plea for help that had brought forth humanity's powerful fleet had accomplished what centuries of resistance had failed to achieve. The end of the Krillian threat and the beginning of a new era where the strong protected the weak and no cry for help would go unanswered.